Hello again, everyone. This is Ken Kibler with eTruckBiz. We will got the attendee list growing, and we will get going here shortly after the top of the hour. Some of the normal topics, as well as pretty good focus on today, will be what would happen if there was a contraction in the economy. So please sit tight for another minute. Thank you very much. All righty. The attendee list seems to have leveled off. Once again, this is Ken Kibler with the Truck Bit. I thank everybody for joining us today as we cover some of the same normal topics, as well as a focus this week on what happens if there is a contraction in the economy, and that does go into your business with a retraction of stops. So, as always, please put your questions in the Q&A or the chat. And without further ado, I'll turn this over to Jeff Walczak.
Right. As always, we need to make sure that you know eTruckBiz is not endorsed, sponsored, approved, or otherwise affiliated with FedEx Corporation. Just calling them like we see them. Volume trends, pickup volume. Now, there you go. Look at those pickup stops. Now, keep in mind, this is on the vans, right? These are the van pickup stops. So that's good stuff. Ooh, pickup packages. That's looking pretty damn good last week. And pickup stops per dispatch, good. How about on the delivery side? Well, not so much. And actually, folks, this is what we're going to talk about today. So, yeah, sometimes when you see the economy contract a little bit, instead of folks shipping large quantities, instead of picking up some stops or some customers on tractor trailers, you'd pick them up on vans. Now, I don't know if that's what's going on here yet, but that's something to see. And the data shows that where the smaller pickup stops are going to the vans versus on tractor trailers. But anyway, so deliveries didn't look so good. It didn't look as good as pickup side. Remember, we still got to show proficiency. We're going to talk about that again later. Uh, so last week, routes dispatch, that's good. Down a little bit, but stops per dispatch, down again. So we want to make sure, and we always ask, we want to ask again today, how many stops per dispatch do you have on the road? Yeah.
We really need to change that trend of 4 weeks in a row of it dropping, because all that's going to do is cut your revenue per dispatch. When your revenue per dispatch drops, it makes it harder and harder for you to really improve your margins. Really makes it hard, almost impossible for you to keep the margins that you had before. Sorry, Jeff.
That's fine. That's actually good advice. So in the news, as most of you know, yes, we'll be seeing you in Orlando, 1st of October. That's cool. Now, as you may have heard, yesterday at least, the stock market was down second or third day in a row. That's not good, especially if you're a stock owner. Most think that for a lot of reasons that a bad economy might be getting worse. So we'll see what happens. And we don't want to create a whole lot of fear, We're not telling you, you know, a lot of us think that the economy hasn't been doing well anyway, and maybe it's just coming to a head, but if some of you on this call may not have been through the volume backing up or getting soft. I mean, we've been through the last couple of years, but that's not necessarily like you might see if something really bad happens. So if things get bad, and that's a big if, there's actually some good news. The good news is that you're contracted with FedEx Corporation. FedEx Corporation is a Fortune 50 company. That's good stuff. FedEx will provide you with a good bit of insulation against the downturn in the economy. Now, not that some things are going to happen to you, they will, but you're not going to go out of business. That's the good news. Because FedEx Corporation isn't going away. However, what happens when the economy gets soft, or if there's a recession, or if it's a bad recession, those old timers on here you'll agree that the volume gets erratic. And that's what we need to prepare for, right? So, in fact, though, we've seen, even in the face of whatever might be going on now or might not be going on now, the volume seems to be hanging in there right now. We talk about vans, trailers, whatever. It seems to be hanging in there. Now, if you were these guys, you couldn't say that. These guys are seeing something else happen to their volume. Their volume is not going the right way. They're promising that it's going to get better, but it's not. Now, another thing about being with FedEx, if you're moving into a recession, you're in the right place because, as most of you know, you're the low-cost provider of last mile service in the industry. And what could happen has happened in the past, and we probably should have another webinar on just this topic. If there's a price war, the low-cost provider of the service can't be priced out of existence. Anyway, slowly but surely, some express volume is finding its way into the ground network. I see we have our star, Mr. Famous, Mr. John Speed on here today. We'll make him more famous even now. Everybody that's on here, say hey to John. How you doing? He was in this article here where Miss Esther was talking about putting the volume together. Just so you know, those of you on here, the panhandle of Florida and southern Alabama saw some what's called optimized volume happen. Next up is the Carolinas and the Portland, Oregon area. That'll be another area that's coming in September. All right, so that extra volume will be helpful if things get bad, right? So for those who haven't been in this space before, what should be expected if an economic slowdown happens? So sometimes when things are good, you see unexpected spikes in volume, or where does volume come from? Or, oh my gosh, they told me there was going to be this many stops and we've got extra stops, more stops. When things go the other way, you see unexpected dips in volume. In the past, that was not too tough to manage because as a business to business carrier, even the dips weren't that bad. For instance, you go to Walmart every day, you go to certain stores every day. So it wasn't too tough to manage, but that's going to be different this time around. This time around, there's some other things to manage. So I don't have to tell anybody this, you're managing decreased margins now thanks to inflation and your settlement not keeping pace with inflation. And Bob Till, you want to mute your phone. Mute your computer there, dude. That's been putting some pressure on your business already, and that's gonna get that could get tougher. Another thing that needs to be managed this time around, and this depends on how long this may last. Is it something short and it's going to be over with real quick, or are we looking at a couple of years? If so, the express service standards are going to be tough to manage. We got to make sure we get 98.5% service or better, or you don't realize the service bonus. And folks, those service bonuses for hitting that 98.5% time definite service, they're substantial. They're large percentages of your revenue. You can't not hit those standards. So that's going to be something tougher to hit to deal with this time around. And then the other thing this time around is the driver culture. Over the last, since the pandemic, the driver culture has changed, and not necessarily for the better. The expectation out there now is to work less than a full-time day and get paid for a full-time day, to earn a full-time wage. That's the culture issue that everybody's already struggling with, but it's going to get to be more pronounced if you got to start reeling things in because the volume isn't there. Okay, those are a few things that have to get managed. There's more than that, but we'll talk about a couple other things here in a second. We'll need to make sure we manage thin margins while maintaining service. Now, this can be done, but it has to be done with a laser focus on what we'll call revenue producing activities. Okay, what do we mean by that? One of the things that you absolutely have to make sure that happens, I mean, you should be doing this now, but you can get away with it a little bit now. But if you start seeing dips in the volume, it's gonna make things very bad. We got to make sure our easy number, our stops per dispatch, got to make sure that the trucks are going out with enough stops on them. That's what Ken said right at the beginning. We got to look at that. We got to make sure that that's happening. But if you think about it, even if we're at the level of productivity we are now, if for some reason the volume dips and we still are sending out the same amount of trucks, or we're not realizing the margins or the stops per dispatch, some of us could go out of business if it gets bad. I don't want to scare everybody, but this has to be managed.
Can I add to that?
Please do.
Yeah. And if volume or the number of stops decreases, what happens? Your density decreases. So maintaining that easy number is going to be harder. So you either have to get some productivity gains, or your drivers have to stay on the road longer to get to that easy number. So you're either going to have to do more stops per hour, while quite frankly, your density is going the other way. So how do I get more stops per hour? I focus on driver methods and accountability to a stops per hour goal. But that's going to be a challenge if your density decreases. But you've got two options: improve productivity on stops per hour, or have your drivers stay out longer. But you got to get the work. You got to keep that work on them.
It can be done. It can be done. We don't want anybody thinking you can't do this. You can do it. It can be done. There's a way to do that, right? That's what we teach all the time. Another thing, another revenue producing activity that needs to be focused on is driver training. Our drivers trained so they can achieve service standards. Training them doesn't mean putting an iPad in their hand and saying, okay, there you go. As long as you know where to go, I guess everything's okay. The way to achieve your stops per dispatch and everything else that's going to happen is driver methods, right? Do your drivers know how to work a truck? Not think they know how to work a truck. Do they know how to work a truck? Does your BC or your BCs, do they know how to work a truck? Do you know how to work a truck? Do you know what we mean by working a truck? There's a way that you work the truck, right? It's not sit at each stop looking for pack. That's going to become very, very important if you were looking for productivity. Another thing, another revenue producing activity that I'm pretty sure is not something that everybody considers doing today, but it's going to be something that we're going to need to look at later to get our stops per dispatch up there. Do we know what a package shuttle is? To increase the number of stops per dispatch. Now, it's what UPS does, especially now, to get the productivity they need out of each one of their dispatches. So, as an example, have you ever been in a Walmart parking lot at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon? What will you see? You'll see 3 or 4 UPS trucks butted up to each other. They're not doing that for fun. What's going on there is somebody brought more stops out to those trucks, right? Those guys are done at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but they're bringing them 20, 30 more stops to keep on going. You have to get the way to get the productivity you need. You have to get more stops on those trucks. It doesn't mean they have to come back to the terminal. Somebody could bring the stops to them. That's something to consider. It's a revenue producing activity.
Another thing that's done by UPS in a station close to here is they'll load 2 trucks for one driver and a management person. Midday will run that other second truck out there because they deal with large packages. You deal with large packages. So can you just take large packages out there? Can you leave section 7,000 and 8,000 off and shuttle those out later? Or can it just be on 2 trucks and your BC swaps a truck out? So you have to look at ways to do this. You got to, as Jeff says, you got to get the revenue on the trucks.
It's the only way it works. So there's some good news and bad news. Now, there's actually something good. So we said, oh, you're going to have to get more productive and everything. That's true. But there's something that's going to happen here that hasn't happened in a long time. And actually, it's great news for CSPs. Again, the bad news is it looks like the economy might be slowing down. Some more evidence of this is if you looked at the jobs number that the government reported, say what you want about this number, but it's at least what's getting reported doesn't look good. It's not a good trend. The unemployment's up, but why is that good for CSPs?
Means your employees aren't looking for work elsewhere because there isn't work elsewhere to look. So,
well, as the news probably gets worse, there's actually an opportunity. It's actually a rare opportunity to replace problem drivers and even those of you that would like to upgrade your BC, you're going to get the opportunity to do so. Better quality of applicant will appear. So folks, think about go all the way back to the pandemic, and you were just happy that somebody showed up to work that day, right? So there was that end of the spectrum. The good news is if there's a slowdown, good folks will be looking for jobs, right? And that's good for you if you're running a business. So now is the time to capitalize on from upgrading your driver standpoint if you need to. Now's the time to capitalize on a crappy economy.
Hey, Jeff.
And you can, yes.
Hey, real quick too. Are your BCs getting with your drivers every week and letting them know how they're doing? Because if they're not, then the drivers can only assume they're doing a good job because no one's saying anything. So there's always got to be constant follow-up. And again, that's something that's productive that they're doing, following up with the driver. But they've got to know where they stand. They want to know where they stand. No one goes into work every day wanting to do a crappy job. But if they don't know, if it's not communicated, they're going to assume, and they should assume, they're doing a good job.
Go back to the one picture we showed about 2 months ago with the driver parked at 2:30 was it 1:30 in the afternoon? They were done for the day. Thought they were doing a good job. They got everything done. But did they need 30 more stops on them? Yeah. So the driver needs to know, hey, we need to put 30 more stops on you so you're out there a full day. Because that's
and
what's
the same
expected.
thing, BCs, they assume they're doing a good job unless you say something. Sit down every week and review the numbers with them. We're at X. What can we do to get to Y? Do we need all these routes? What happens if we just cut one route? We're running 100 stops, we cut one route, then that gives everyone else, 9, 10 more stops, 11 more stops. Is that a big deal to be able to do that? And again, you say, well, I'm in all rural. You still have your cities, you're a portion of the terminal, and that stays pretty consistent day to day. Each of your work areas is a portion of you. So if you've got a dense area, a city that's getting 30% of it, they're going to get 30% of those stops. But again, they're dense, so it doesn't matter that much. You're not going to have your rural area all of a sudden, by cutting one route, get 15 more stops. That's not going to happen. It's going to go to your dense area in those small towns or whatever. But again, you've got to communicate to your BCs and talk to them and have the meetings week in, week out so they know where they are.
Communication is always important. Good in a good market or bad, communication is always important. Anyway, if you are looking to focus on your revenue producing activities, and that's what the guys are saying here, you can always use eTruckBiz Business Services Group and the Administrative Services Manager Program. The services and the programs, those of you that are on them now, that it takes a bunch of things off your plate so you can focus on revenue producing activity. Now, that's the thing here, folks. With a decent flow of volume, you can get by, right? The problem is when you don't get that volume, you still got your expenses. From a business standpoint, you have to do everything you can to focus on revenue producing activity. I don't know how much clearer to say that. You don't want to focus on non-revenue producing activity. And that's what a lot of folks end up doing is they work on things that don't produce revenue. That's not going to work if the volume goes south a little bit. That's not just now, it's the key to the business all the time, right? And it's really the key through getting through it through choppy volume. So if you're interested in seeing the programs that we talked about last week, and they were the Administrative Services Manager Program, and a lot of you on here right now did. We did a lot of presentations last week and signed a bunch of folks up. And also the Optimized Performance Program, which actually is kind of the little cherry on top of the cake there. That's the key to squeezing more money out of your operation, right? If you want to talk to folks there. Oh, and at the heart of all this, of course, and we just talked about it is driver recruiting. And by the way, that's part of the program. It's part of the Administrative Services Manager program. We were looking at some things this morning. We just want you guys to know that our recruiting program uses real onshore people doing real driver recruiting. It's not AI and a bunch of unapprovable names and addresses that they'll produce for you and say, hey, there you go, here's your driver. I'm wondering, Miss Seneca, are you on here?
Yes, I am.
Can you say something? So Seneca's in charge of our recruiting program and a lot of other things, but one of them is the recruiting program. Can you tell us what our folks see? I don't know, there's kind of a difference between ways of looking at recruiting, quality versus quantity, and why you would want to focus more on quality recruiting versus some of these people are pushing quantity recruiting.
Well, I think the main result of recruiting the way we do it, which is emphasizing quality, is we would expect there's a lower turnover rate. If you're just looking for a body in that seat, the chances of them not staying are much higher. So our rate of screened candidates is about 7%. So that means out of every 100 calls, we only accept 7% that pass our screening. So we're looking for not just their experience and all the requirements that a contractor would require. We're also, our recruiters have decades of experience, and they truly get a vibe for somebody to see, are you really going to be able to handle this job? They explain it thoroughly. The lifting, the type of duties that are entailed, so that there's a better chance that this candidate knows what they're getting into. They're not surprised on day one what this job is about, and therefore they'll stay longer. So it's a better quality. We're not wasting time by just getting hundreds of people that may or may not even want this type of job. And having to sift through all those the hard way, which would be hire them, they don't work out, later we got to hire again. So that's what we emphasize. No, we won't get you 100 candidates, but we'll get you 3 good ones, is our philosophy.
You guys, Bob and Ken, want to say anything about quality driver recruiting versus quantity?
You have a lot of cost. Yeah, you have a lot of cost involved with putting a person through the train-the-trainer program. Your manager's off the street working with this person. So therefore, if your turnovers increase and you've got a candidate that's not of quality, as Seneca said, they're going to turn over and you're just going to be completing a vicious cycle. When you get a good quality candidate, you're spending time with them, they're going to stick around. You're having to do the job once. Basically, it's a 110, 100 rule. Do it right the first time, costs you $1. You have to do it right a second time, it's going to cost you $10. If you continue that same process, it's going to cost you $100. So get the quality first, and that is the focus. There's no computer that can get a feel for a driver more so than the human interaction of professional onshore recruiting people.
That's what I was gonna say. These guys are $99 and you get all these names and addresses. How is that helping you? Well, today I need whatever today. Fantastic. And what are you gonna need tomorrow? The same thing. You don't want to fix a problem with a problem. Just recruiting, those of you most of you on this call know, you've been around us for a long time. And if you've ever been to one of our live, any kind of events, you know that at least I'll sit there and tell you the most important thing you can do is driver recruiting. That's where we can trace every one of your problems to not doing a good job, not doing a quality job driver recruiting. Anyway, okay. Well, enough said about that. But here's your chance as the economy goes bad. It's going to be your chance to get some quality driver recruits. It's worth the time and expense to do that. I don't think I have to tell any of you on this call that, well, how important that is. So anyways, if you will contact us about going through those programs, we'll also make sure you get the current version of the BC Daily Checklist that's out there right now. And you can get you can make your appointments. I know a lot of you we already have some for this week. You want to get with Becca and get your appointment scheduled for the ASM program, the OPP program, and driver recruiting and some other things. So, Mr. Ken, see if there's
Yep.
some questions.
Looks like we do have one question. Our package count is sufficient, but what FedEx has done with those packages over the past year or so is create all these bulk stops, which hurt us. We don't make money on bulk stops. We have to continually ask BDS for FedEx to create bulk stop rates with no success. Even management at our terminal knows this is a problem. Not sure how a bulk stop is created. So I'm a little confused by this question, but
Well, you're not going to get any argument from me that I hate to do this, but I think FedEx ought to pass. They charge their customer by the cubic foot if it's over a certain standard level. Then I don't know why they can't pass some of that on to you, because you're right about that. There's a cost there. However, especially if the volume takes a dive, you got to deal with it, right? We got to figure out a way to make it happen, because you're still going to have bills, and you have to somehow figure out how to pay those bills. You're right, but we still gotta make something happen.
yeah, if you're looking at the
Hey,
size of the
Jeff.
cube, it definitely is big. Once again, you can plan cube size on DRO. And it's critical to look at that, and dynamic DRO can spread that bulk out, because the last thing you want to do is create a low volume bulk route. You know, I know FedEx was preaching that 3 years ago. That kind of went away. Good, because it was never going to create enough revenue to justify 2 people in a truck out there delivering 30 stops. Just wasn't going to happen. Wasn't not going to create enough. And it creates the dreaded, my most hated pet peeve, cleanup routes. So what you got to do is disperse the bulk. You know, if you've got people driving past stops, can they do some bulk? Again, a work area is flexible. The driver can't tell you that's not my area. Whatever I put on your truck, on my truck, is your area. So I think that's what's important. So, Bob, am I wrong about the DRO with the cube
That's
size?
exactly, and that's where the dynamic routes come in. And don't let them build the false walls. You know, we go in terminals, we see it all the time. You're not full. Full back in the day was full. Nook and cranny all the way down the aisle. That was full. Then you run those bulk stops first, then hit your 1,000s, 2,000s, 3,000s, so on and so forth. But you do not need an empty aisle, because there's no way you should be back in the 7,000, 8,000 pulling packages. You're pulling from the ones and twos. So you could have a half a truck full of bulk stops that are down throughout your route and still starting the ones and twos. Don't let them buffalo you. You know which ones you have the issues with. But again, sit down and talk to them and show them what their numbers are and where they need to be. Everyone needs to know that. You need to know how many stops you got on each route every day. Your BCs need to know. You need to convey that to your BCs, and they need to convey it to your drivers. but you guys got this. If you need help with the dynamic anchors, reach out to us.
Yeah, please do.
That's what we're here for.
The dynamic anchors are absolutely key to your profitability in the future with time definite and this bulk. You gotta disperse bulk, otherwise you're running cleanup routes. And not only is it painful for me to say, it's absolutely painful to your bottom line. So another question, early in the webinar, you mentioned optimized volume. I believe you said it was coming to the Carolinas in September. Is that express volume without the time commitments? Or can you explain exactly what that is, and what we can expect when it comes to us?
So no, that's optimized volume. So that's the new thing is as the after June 1st, the terminals that are going to get express, they're calling the CSAs optimized CSAs, which means they're taking volume from express terminals or other ground terminals or however they're doing it. They're optimizing the area. And no, that'll be there's a lot to that. There's more to it than just putting some express on your trucks. That's most folks have some 5 1/8 now or some deferred second day express kind of things on the trucks now, yeah, for sure. But in the optimized areas, the folks are seeing 1030s and noon. Some of them don't see 1030s, depends on the area. But you're definitely getting a good bit of the 1030s. But that's coming from, like I said, if they close a express terminal, that volume is coming over. There haven't, well, I shouldn't say there haven't been because they're doing different things, but in general, it's the express volume that has time commits, right? Does that make sense? And it says, can you explain what exactly that is and what we can expect when it comes to you, you're going to get a different contract. It's pretty much the old contract with some new things in it. So there's some idiosyncrasies there. And then how they pay for express and time definites is going to change a little bit on you too. And that's probably a whole new, that could be next week's topic if you want to get into it that way, but it's coming. It's coming. And then just so you know, they've changed their mind several times, but it appears after the first of the year, there's going to be a whole lot more express volume coming, but we heard that last year. So we'll see. But at least I think the plan now is to really let it rip after the first of the year.
As Jeff said, Southwest Florida and the Panhandle went through this last week, and I saw some things on a FedEx employee page about the stations closing in South Florida, people retiring, taking other jobs. So it's happening, and we don't know, exactly when your building will. But there's some in the Carolinas in September, and as Jeff said, it'll be a pretty big rollout in January, and hopefully we all learn a little bit more in October when we're in Orlando.
So another thing about that though is, and Carrie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the optimized terminals, didn't they make everybody renegotiate their contract? Or am I wrong? I mean, definitely the folks that got optimized CSAs did. Is she on here?
Yes, they all did.
They all did. And
Yes,
they're
is
different.
correct.
There's some
Because they were
difference,
different definitions.
and the negotiation went a little differently too, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
That definitely, folks, if you're in the Carolinas or up in the Pacific Northwest, whatever, you'll want to, we'll always say this, don't do this yourself, but here you go. It's a new kind of negotiation. So we can help you. We've helped some other folks.
Yeah, just to what Jeff's saying, you're getting all kinds of different numbers. You're gonna have your actual numbers, you're gonna have the optimized CSA packet numbers, and you're gonna have the PCAT numbers. And Carrie, did any of those match?
Absolutely not.
So Carrie's report really can put that into perspective for you and make it make sense. So and that's important, understanding, you know, which numbers are which and what actually makes sense for my business.
You know, and another point to add, and I know many of you haven't went through it yet, but the time definite stop charges and information that goes with the packet, those charges are negotiable also. That's not readily known either, but we do know that they are negotiable and it may not be conveyed that way to you.
Right.
Other than the 98.5 service bonus, how did the contracts look? Question for Carrie.
That's a loaded question because it is truly determined on the area or even the terminal that we're dealing with, due to the fact that they are redefining so many of the CSAs while they're doing this. And as far as rates go, if you want a broad statement, they seem to be fair or better than, you know, a current contract. However, it truly depends on the optimized CSA volume and if you are going to see all of that volume that they're predicting for you in the length of the contracted term.
Yeah. And that per stop bonus rate can vary whether you have 10:30s or you just have noons, 5s, and 8 p.m.s. Because you know, there doesn't seem to be any logic while some stations are not getting the 10:30, but there's some stations that are not getting the 10:30s. And so that those rates, your percentage of stops that are due by 10:30 in the morning will determine what that per stop rate is. Would you agree with that, Carrie, on your overall for that 98.5 bonus?
Correct. And another thing to add is that advanced service fee is proposed differently. Also, it's a tiered amount of money that is offered at different times through this process. And it's not like it is currently where either you take the upfront fee or you negotiate it into a contract. It is a tiered amount of money, and it's as long as you sign in these 3 different areas and follow the rules, then you get that money besides the negotiation or the MISO offers or the other elements of these new contracts.
So once again, confusing, don't do it on your own.
And this last time, I think the folks didn't get a lot of time to mull it over, did they? They were getting
Nope.
their, I don't even know that they got a couple weeks.
No, and some of them, they accelerated the timeline. So, you know, it was like within a week, you had to have it all done.
Yeah, it's Ken said, and Carrie will tell you, and I'll tell you, especially this one, don't do this one yourself. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that.
Excellent. All righty. Looks like all the questions are done. Again, today was a little bit different where we talked about contracting volume, but still was the same focus on your easy number or stops per dispatch. That number is going to be important whether business is growing or business is contracting. It's something you have to know every day. Jeff asked that question at the beginning of every call. We're hoping you're asking your BC that question at the beginning of every day. And we do have another question. So, Jeff, can we all expect to be operating altered CSAs within the next few years? Meaning, do you see a world where many non-conforming contractors are replaced by performing contractors? Is that why they are leaning on the metals program?
I think you answered your own question. Here,
You
look,
are correct.
seriously. Here's something else. There's the express culture and there's the ground culture. Okay. The express culture is you can't lose a package and there's no reason why a package doesn't get delivered before it's supposed to be delivered. It's just what it is. They don't think, I mean, a lot of you guys are dealing with the Code 85 thing. Mr. Rod and others out there, Mr. Speed. That's because in their world, you don't lose a package. It's not misloaded on the wrong truck. Now, it's a different culture, right? The culture that's going to win here has to be the service culture. It has to be the culture that gets the 10:30 to the 10:30 stop by 10:30. That you can't sell a premium service if you don't provide it. So FedEx knows that, and the folks that can't do that, I don't know that they're gonna get rid of everybody. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they want everybody to be able to provide that premium service. If you can't, there might be multiple ways that your services get offered to the industry. Put it that way.
It goes back to your one slide, Jeff, demonstrating proficiency.
And that's new wording in the contract, in the new contract, right? And not everybody's seen that yet. Right, that is exactly what that's all about. So yeah, everybody's gonna see altered CSAs. It's already happening, especially in the optimized areas. You can answer that. You guys can answer that question on your.
And there seems to be some different rules in different terminals and stations. I met with a CSP a week and a half ago where he's getting a second CSA that is not contiguous to his, but it's going to be under him, but it's and it's going to have two contracts. So, but he's done well as a CSP. Are they going to let him get the 55% of that building? I doubt it, but they want to do business with good CSPs that have demonstrated proficiency. So I guess that's probably the best way to answer that. So, and they won't mess around. As Jeff said, you can't sell a premium service that isn't premium. So they're not going to mess around with CSPs that cannot proficiently deliver the premium service. All right. So we will be back here next week again. I want to thank everybody for your time today. We look forward to having everybody back here. So if we don't talk to you before then, please have a safe and profitable week. Thank you very much.